Can you imagine being abducted by a river monster? Or your dad sacrificing a puppy to said river monster? Or you being sacrificed to the river monster instead? That's the kind of shit that goes down in today's story, okay? But desperation will do that to a person. When your family's starving and there's no food on the table, you will do anything to survive. Buckle up because today we're talking about a Brazilian folktale about a fisherman and his son. Okay, so a long time ago, there was this guy, we'll call him Antonio, and his family. He had a wife, but he had a lot of kids. Like a lot of kids, okay? There were 7 of them. So, Antonio's a fisherman. He's the only one in his family who works. And you can imagine that being a fisherman probably wouldn't feed your family as quickly as perhaps you would want. So, Antonio had to work really hard to make sure that he could make ends meet. They didn't live in an area with an abundance of fish or anything, so things were tough. Well, one day he's returning from his work and his youngest son runs up to him and he's so excited and he's like, "Dad, I found this puppy. Can I keep it? I've always wanted a puppy. I never ask you for anything. Can I keep it, please?" Antonio's looking down at his youngest son and he's like, "He's really fucking cute. And he'd look really fucking cute with a puppy." So, of course, Antonio, even though things are tough right now, he says yes because he knows that it's going to make his kid really happy. Antonio said yes, but he kind of felt a different way. Like he didn't want the puppy to be around because that's an extra mouth to feed, right? Because he already has 7 kids and then, him and his wife, that's 2 extra people. And now this puppy would be 10. Math. I can do math. So the entire night, that's the only thing that Antonio can think about, right? He's like, "Ugh, damn it. Okay, well, I guess this is how it is." He wakes up for work the next morning and he's just dragging himself out of bed. He's like, how am I going to catch any more fish to feed this dog to, pretty much. He's walking down to the river having a pity party for himself. And he's like, you know what? Maybe today will be different. He's starting to try and be positive. Manifest his positive vibes, all of the good things that he could possibly get, right? Well, he throws his net into the river and nothing. It's the same thing as usual. Whole lot of nothing. It's not looking good for him. He casts his net a couple of other times and still nothing. On his 4th cast, he throws the net back into the river and this time he hears a voice, like a booming loud voice from inside the river. And the voice says, "If you will give me whatever you find in your house when you go home that's new, I will give you fisherman's luck. You will catch as many fish as you wish." And Antonio's mind immediately goes to the puppy. He's like, "I know exactly who I'm going to sacrifice." Which, like, what the hell, Antonio? You're going to sacrifice a puppy? Come on, you couldn't have gone home and been like, "Oh, my daughter got some new socks," or something, Like, or a new rock even that has appeared in your house. You can't take that to the river monster. Just immediately mind goes to puppy, I guess. So anyway, of course, Antonio's like, yeah, I didn't even want that bitch to begin with. I'm gonna go sacrifice the puppy." Uh-huh. Sounds like a great excuse for you to drown the puppy, Antonio. I don't like where this is going, but Antonio accepts the river's request and he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna go home and find something new and bring it back here to sacrifice." The river gets really intense though, okay? Because it's like, you gotta seal the deal with blood.
"Give me your blood."
So Antonio obliges and he pokes his finger with a knife and squeezes a few drops of blood into the river and boom, pact is sealed. So the river clarifies if he ever breaks his vow, then the river giant will come after him and his family. At this point of the story, I was sitting there thinking, like, what river giant? So it sounds like the river giant is living within the river on the bottom. So it kind of controls this river. So Antonio's like, you know what? I'm thinking about it and we're just stuck in such a financial position that I have to take this offer. The puppy can smite him from heaven or whatever. Finally, after their blood bond is sealed and everything, he's like, "Okay, let's see if this was legit or if I was just hallucinating." So he throws his net back into the river, and this time, when he pulls it out, it's full of fish. He casts his net 3 more times, and 3 more times he gets a full net. He had to stop casting because he just couldn't carry that much home. Antonio's ecstatic at this point because he has enough fish to take home and feed his family, but he has extra to be left over so then he can sell it in the market and then have some money instead of just the food. So he's walking home, excited, dancing a little bit, has a little pep in his step because he gets to be the hero of the day. But when he gets closer to his house, one of his kids runs up to him and he's like, "Hey, what's up?" But this kid has some interesting news for him. Antonio's excited to see them. And the kid's also excited to see them. He's brimming with excitement. And Antonio's like, well, what are you excited about? The puppy? And his kid's like, Dad, guess what we got today? And Antonio's like, yeah, the puppy. I know your brother told me about it yesterday. Well, imagine Antonio's surprise when he comes back with, no, Dad, we have a new baby brother. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, dude, it didn't cross your mind that your wife was like 9 months pregnant, could have a baby any day when you were making this blood bond with the river monster? That this could potentially lead to some kind of kerfuffle? At this point, the dots are connecting for Antonio, and he's realizing what's going on, and he's starting to break down. You know, he's distraught because now he's going to have to sacrifice his kid to this river giant. He finally thinks like, okay, there's nothing else I can do. If I break this blood bond, then the river giant is going to come after myself and the rest of the family. So I got to tell my wife and we got to come up with a plan, you know? So he goes to his wife and he's like, hey, this is what's gone down. And she's also distraught, but I guess she just doesn't really give a fuck. She's like, okay, fine, you know, like take the kid. Because she kisses the baby and says goodbye so that it can be swallowed by the river. I guess you play stupid games and you win stupid prizes, right? Well, Antonio takes the baby to the river the next day and he's like, here, take my youngest son. Before Antonio releases the child to the river, though, he stares really hard within the deep depths of this river and he can finally see the river giant. Before, he just thought that the river was talking to him, kind of like what I had thought initially when I was reading, but he can now see the giant and he's like, okay, now I know, like that's the thing that was talking to me. Well, he gives the baby to the giant, or, you know, to the river, and the giant doesn't mistreat the baby. At least there's that. Because the giant takes the baby to his underwater palace, which is made out of gold and silver, mother of pearl, all the beautiful gems and jewels that you could think of, really. So I guess there's that, you know, like the baby's not going to go hungry and it's going to be okay in that sense. From here on out, we're going to call the baby Miguel, okay? Let's fast forward 15 years. He's just being raised by this river monster, river giant situation. But keep in mind, this entire time, he has not seen the river giant. So 15 years go by, and he's a strapping young 15-year-old man. Long, tan, handsome, the whole shebang. So you know how I said that Miguel had never seen the river giant? Well, he'd never seen another person before either. It sounds like whenever he needed food or something, it would just like kind of beamed over to him. Or I guess since they live in this river palace, perhaps there were like river animals that would give him the food or whatever. He'd never seen the giant, but he'd only heard it before. One day, the river giant is like, I'm gonna go out of town for a while and do some river giant stuff. See ya. Here's the key to the palace. Don't meddle with anything or you die. So a few days go by and Miguel hasn't heard anything from the giant. At this point, you know, Miguel's kind of lonely because he's never seen another person. He's only communicated with the giant through discussion. Like he's only heard the giant before. They haven't seen each other. So he's lonely, right? He's like, what am I going to do? 2 weeks passes and Miguel's like, I'm going to take one of the keys that he gave me and then open this one door that I haven't been in. See what's up. Inside of this room, Miguel sees a big fat lion and there's some hay next to him, which presumably he's supposed to eat. Miguel's like, that's going to be a no from me. And he closes the door. Another 2 weeks passes, and then Miguel's like, okay, I guess I'm gonna try one of these other keys for one of these other doors and see what happens. So he goes to this new room and opens the door, and he sees 3 horses, one black, one chestnut, and one white. And the horses are also pretty fat and happy, but they have a bunch of meat next to them, presumably for them to eat. Again, Miguel's like, this is gonna be a no from me, and he closes the door. Miguel is left alone for like a month at this point. He's kind of like, okay, I'm at the end of my rope. Where the fuck is this river giant? Because remember, the river giant was his only company ever. Another 2 weeks passes and Miguel is like, okay, I'm going to open another door and see what happens. So he opens this third door and there's a bunch of armor and weapons in this room. This room gets his attention. He's intrigued, but he's like, oh crap, I'm not going to meddle with anything because otherwise I'm going to die, right? So he closes this door too. He's so lonely at this point though. He's like, I guess it can't hurt if I just hang out with the horses, right? So he goes back to that room with the horses. He's like, all right, I'm going to vibe with these guys and hopefully they'll just keep me company and it'll be cool. Well, the horses were really nice to him. And I guess they could talk, which is kind of cool. But they were like, hey, Miguel, you're really cool. You're like really fun to hang out with. Could you do us a solid though? There must have been some kind of mix up in the food situation, and the lion in one of the other rooms must have gotten our hay, and our hay is his meat came to us. So, we got a little switcheroo on our hands. Would you be so kind to please bring us the hay and give him the meat, please? They're like, if you do that for us, you'll earn our respect and we will serve you forever. Pretty cool, right? All of that made sense to Miguel, so he's like, sure, yeah, I'll switch your guys' food for you. And honestly, the horses and the lion were pretty happy that he fixed this mix-up for them. But after all was said and done, Miguel's like, oh crap, I just meddled. I totally was meddling, and he told me not to meddle. So he's like, I'm gonna be donezo now, what do I do? The black horse was a total bro, and he's like, okay, I got you into this mess, I'll get you out. Trust. So the black horse is really taking it upon himself to be like, Miguel, I'm going to get you out of here because you're a solid bro and I love you. I don't know what the other two horses were doing at this point. They were just like dicking around or something. But the black horse from here on out, we'll call him Francisco. And Francisco's like, okay, let's make a plan, dude. How are we going to get you out of here? Because the river giant will hold his word and he will try to kill you. They're brainstorming and Francisco's like, okay, Miguel, I've lived here a long time. I know this place like the back of my hand, and I know that I'm stronger than the river's current. I know I can get you past the river's current. You just need to be able to protect yourself. So he's like, okay, gather your things, maybe some extra clothes, then get those weapons and the armor, and then hop on my back, and we'll get you out, okay? Francisco's like, you go do those things. I'm going to fuel up on some hay and change my horseshoes, and we'll meet back here, and then we're going to peel out, okay? Sure enough, as Miguel is gathering up all his stuff and getting the armor on and everything, the river giant just so happens to come back, right? Miguel hears the footsteps of the river giant and he's like, we gotta go. So you sprint over to Francisco and he's like, okay, we gotta run, okay? And they're out of there. Francisco sprints for as long as he can. Luckily, the hay helped his energy stay up. So they got to a nearby kingdom pretty quickly, actually. And Miguel is like, okay, Francisco, like, thank you for helping us so much, but I gotta keep us out of the rain now. We gotta get some shelter. I gotta get a job for us. So Miguel goes to the king of this kingdom and he's like, hey, what work do you have for me? The king takes one look at this guy and he's like, you look like you have been not working for the past 15 years. You got some soft ass hands. Look all pale and shit, like you have not done any manual labor, so I'm not going to give you that job because you would probably, one, die, or you would, two, not do a very good job, and that's not good for anyone. Smart king. So the king is like, why don't you tend to my garden so that you can give the flowers to the princesses, my daughters, every day? Because these princesses would get as many roses and beautiful flower arrangements as they could every day, just so then things would smell nice and look pretty in their room. But remember, Miguel is looking like a sick Victorian child at this point. But that does something to the ladies. Like, even now, I don't know about you, but like Mr. Timothy Chalamet, he's pretty handsome. So think Timothy Chalamet, but Brazilian, okay? Side note, I don't know if you've seen Dune 2 yet, but like, objectively, Timmy's very handsome and everything, but I just like couldn't get myself to believe that he and Zendaya were a thing in that movie. I don't know if anyone else felt that way, but I was like, it's not giving romantic partners. It was more like middle school best friends. That's what I got from it. Was that just me? I don't know. Anyway, Miguel Chalamet delivers the flowers to the king's daughter the next day, and she's like, Dad, this man is very fine. Finer than any of the princes you try to set me up with. I like him. Well, every day princes from the neighboring kingdoms would try to serenade this princess and her two older sisters. They would offer songs and flowers and chocolates, the works. Well, on this day, the two older sisters were gushing like they normally did, but not the youngest sister, the one who had received the flowers from Miguel. Let's call her Isabel. Well, Isabel was like not totally interested in these princes this day, but like that only made them want her more. Reverse psychology works so well on these men. This is probably really toxic advice, and I'm sorry to go on another tangent, but I think that this is pretty helpful. So, if you're trying to get this man or woman wrapped around your little finger, all you gotta do is talk to him a little bit, like an hour back and forth or so, but then you're gonna go radio silent for like 5 to 8 hours. The key is that you do it sparingly, okay? You don't want to come off uninterested, just busy, you know? Perhaps with family or studying or whatever, but also perhaps with someone else, you know? I can reveal my toxic secrets at this point because I'm married. I'm not going to have to do that again. But I can impart my wisdom on you if you are dating. I don't know if it's helpful, but try it. Jeez. I'm sorry, I keep going off on tangents. Back to Miguel. He's watching these rich, pretty boys, and he's kind of having a pity party for himself. He feels himself filling with jealousy a little bit because he's like, I want a chance with Isabel. Just then he catches a glimpse of himself in the river. And he's like, whoa, I look like Timothy Chalamet. I got a chance. So he goes, okay, I am going to sing for the princess and I'm going to offer her some flowers and see if I can woo her, right? So he plucks some flowers from the gardens and saunters over to her, singing the sweetest and most beautiful song ever. It started off as like a really gentle melody, kind of like the trickle of a really small stream, but then it built up into this like large, beautiful bravado, sort of like a current of a river. And Isabel's sisters were like, oh my God, who's this guy? But Isabel knew from the sound of his voice that it was Miguel. Fast forward a few months, Miguel's working really hard. He's really trying to impress Isabel, first of all, but also, provide for himself and Francisco. Well, the king is like, hey, we need some birds for this feast. Every young, able-bodied man who works for the kingdom, please, go and try to hunt something. Well, I guess all the other men in this kingdom sucked at hunting because they came up empty-handed. And Miguel was like, okay, bet. And he just got like 20 of these birds, and they're like big and fat, totally ready for this feast. The cooks are looking at Miguel like, this is gonna be the biggest feast ever. It's gonna be great. Anyway, they're all preparing the food, getting it all set up and everything, and all the other princes are looking around like, who the fuck caught all these birds? And they're asking each other, like, which one of you guys did it? Because they all know each other. All the princes are like, wait, who did this? Nobody's fessing up. So finally, one of the princes who was serenading the sisters before, he's like, you know what? I'm going to take the credit. Which, like, who the fuck does that? Anyway, he's like, I'm going to take the credit. And everyone else is gassing him up like, yeah, do it. It'll be great. Nobody fessed up, though, because Miguel, he's not a prince. He was just dressed in his regular servant clothes, and he was standing somewhere, over there, or he was helping or something. He wasn't totally talking about, like, everything in this conversation. He wasn't privy to this info. Like, at this point, it's not like he was trying to get himself noticed or anything. He was just trying to do as good of a job as he could for his work because he was trying to hunker down and figure out the best way that he could really get to know Isabel, or like, I don't know, go about asking for her hand in marriage. So eventually the king comes out and he is like, okay, I'm gonna sit at the head of the table, and he sees all these birds and he's like, whoa, which one of you guys did it? This is crazy. And of course, doofus number one is like, it me, hi, I did it. Totally lying, by the way. But the king is like, whoever caught all these birds is an asset to my land, I would like this person to be in my family for their hunting prowess. So whoever did it, you can have the hand of one of my daughters, whichever one you'd like. Obviously, that just makes the princes be like, oh my God, it was me. The ones who were serenading the girls before. And the king is like looking at some of these guys who are like now all piping up like, it was me. And he's like, I've seen you guys hunt though. It was definitely not you. You can't even catch a fucking squirrel. Well, Miguel is like, now's my chance. And he runs up to the head of the table and he's like, sir, it was me. And he goes, I have lived close to those birds my entire life. I lived around a river. I know what these animals do, what their habits are, what their migration patterns are, and that's how I knew exactly where they would be, and that's why I caught so many. The king was kind of shocked at first, but he was like, okay, yeah, your explanation actually makes a lot of sense. And it would be hard for Miguel to make up all of this information since he kind of told the king exactly where on his lands that these birds were dwelling, and he could probably go and check it for if he really wanted. Well, Miguel convinced the king pretty quick enough because the king's like, okay, yeah, like I believe you. You can pick the hand of one of my daughters. And of course, he and Isabella just look at each other and they're like, it's go time. And their wedding plans began the very next day. It's said that Miguel found a necklace made of gold and adorned with huge diamonds on the banks of a river. Perhaps a parting gift from the river giant for isolating him for 15 years? Who knows? The only thing that didn't have a happy ending about this story was that Miguel's parents never knew about the good fortune that came over him. They were always really guilty about having to sacrifice their child to the river. They never had any closure about it, unfortunately. But that is all I have for you on the adventures of the fisherman and his son, a fun Brazilian folktale. Let me know if you want to hear more folktales. I've been having a really fun time looking at this stuff. I actually started reading this one about Maui. So if you've ever seen Moana, it's about Maui and how he got his jawbone, how he got like the thing that kind of helped him change into those different spirits or like the different animals. I really think these folktales are fun. They're just like kind of cutesy, but also really interesting to see the folklore and like deeper implications within each culture. I know some people might think it's kind of kiddie, but honestly, one of my favorite things growing up was hearing the Indian folk tales that my mom learned growing up. So I thought I would indulge in some nostalgia for a moment. The plan right now is to schedule some more chill videos, more, intermittently, and then I can work on some longer, more intense videos while those are scheduled. I don't know how things will go in that regard, but I mean, if you like this video and you want to see more stuff like it, then feel free to let me know by liking and subscribing. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!